The latest on Joe Burrow, plus Tee Higgins franchise tag. Do the Bengals plan on trading their star wide receiver? That and much, much more right now at the NFL Combine. Hi again, everyone, and welcome in to Cincinnati Bengals Talk. I'm James Rapien alongside Elise Jesse here in Indianapolis, where Duke Tobin talked today, and so did Bengals head coach Zac Taylor. A lot of updates, a lot to react to, Elise. Let's start with Joe Burrow. Everything is A-okay to a degree, at least up to this point, progressing well. Joe Burrow still not fully recovered. Zac Taylor didn't want to give a timeline for him to throw passes or anything. But it sounds like it's all systems heading in the right direction for Joe Burrow.
I laughed when Zac Taylor said he didn't want to give timelines because he's been burned on that in the past when he first started in the coaching world or the head coaching world with the Bengals.
That was the A.J. Green.
Yes, that was the A.J. Green debacle. But I think it's good news that they are saying, Duke Tobin and Zac Taylor are both saying that Joe Burrow is progressing in the manner that they hope to see him progress at this stage, and he's still got quite a bit of time, a few more months before he actually has to prove himself again and show people that he can throw and he can be accurate and he can be the old Joe that we knew and trust. And
so obviously all the offseason conversation revolves around that, right? Joe Burrow being healthy, Joe Burrow being the Joe that we know, and so time will tell. But there are a lot of other offseason topics, including Tee Higgins, and so let's get to that. Tee Higgins officially franchise tagged on Monday, and Duke Tobin was asked about the hypothetical trades. Zac Taylor, who last time I asked him about Tee, he said it's hard to envision a scenario where Tee Higgins isn't on the team in 2024. He said that back in January. Well, the Bengals didn't waste much time tagging him, and I think it's pretty black and white for the Bengals right now. Doesn't mean they won't trade him. But I think they view it as we're tagging T, $21.8 million. He's going to be on the team this year. Maybe something changes. Maybe they get offered something crazy. But I expect T to be on the team and catch passes from Joe Burrow in 2024.
I do as well, and I think that they were really smart in tagging T. I think they learned from the 2015 team with A.J. Green and not Mohamed Sanu. He was also on the team, but Marvin Jones Jr. A.J. Green had such a productive year in 2015, and Marvin Jones did as well. And in 2016, Marvin Jones was no longer wide receiver number 2 opposite A.J. Green. And A.J. Green seemed to really struggle from that point on. I think they have learned their lesson in that department.
Yeah, losing, it's a really good... And it's an interesting dynamic because they tag T, but that doesn't mean T's going to be here forever.
Right.
And so what do they do? And I think they will be evaluating wide receivers certainly this week going up to the NFL draft. I also think it would be really hard to replace Tyler Boyd and Tee Higgins in the same offseason. Right. And I don't get the vibe that Tyler Boyd's going to return. It just doesn't feel that way. We both covered Tyler when he was drafted. He's been in Cincinnati since 2016. It just doesn't feel like he's going to be back. It doesn't mean that it won't happen. It doesn't mean it can't happen. But do you get that vibe that he's going to be back?
Yeah, and for you guys watching this, I think you might be asking, why do you feel like that? I think you and I feel like that because you can get a vibe when you're face-to-face with a player. You can get a vibe of how they feel about a certain player and what they seem to feel like is going to happen next year. And no player on the offensive side of the ball that I spoke to seemed like they were necessarily confident that they would have their teammate back with them. That's what gave me the inclination that, hey, they might be moving on from Tyler Boyd after a long, long career in Cincinnati.
And a couple others that we'll see on Joe Mixon, that roster bonus on March 17th. Duke Tobin was asked about that. Will Joe be back or not? And he said, well, we put that roster bonus in there for a reason, and so did his agent. Yeah. And that's the line of demarcation. So we will see on Joe Mixon. They haven't committed one way or the other. But those two guys, Boyd and Mixon, obviously a big part and have been in Cincinnati since Zac Taylor got hired. The other two, Josh Tupou and Sam Hubard. Yeah. Well, 3 of the 4, Hubbard's under contract, but 3 of the 4 could potentially be elsewhere. Tupou and Boyd are free agents, so I would expect potentially both of those guys to sign elsewhere. Real quick, since I mentioned Tupou, DJ Reader is in the building. Duke Tobin mentioned that. He mentioned that he's still rehabbing from that quad tendon tear. And the good news is he said they are having dialogue. They know how valuable DJ is. The bad news is I think it's a really complex situation. And I'm not sure with the injury, even though they're confident Duke's words, not mine. You can catch both videos, by the way, Zach Taylor and Duke Tobin, right here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk. But I think that's a big question mark, because can you bank on DJ Reader to come back knowing that's a position of need? And they made that very clear, that defensive tackle, offensive tackle, two big positions of need. But can you bank on DJ at the start of the season? I don't think anyone knows the answer to that, including him.
Something so special about DJ is something that, is out of his control. He's a giant, massive body. Just his sheer size can affect a quarterback's pocket in such a big way. And I think they obviously love that about him. And I think that if they were to plan for the future and maybe add a young, talented guy in to maybe replace DJ Reader in the future, I think that their size and their ability to collapse a pocket would be a big component of that. Granted, we don't know if DJ Reader can come back and be the same DJ Reader like you just said. However, he has done it before. He has come back from injury and been productive before. Maybe not to the level that he was before injury, but he was still able to come in and make a good enough impact to where the team was able to win with him.
Yeah, and you're right. This exact injury, just the other leg.
Yeah.
And so there is some experience there. There's probably some trust there. And so we'll see. Hopefully they can get something done with DJ, because he's such a big part of this Bengals defensive front, of their identity. And also, I know there's been some Sam Hubard rumblings.
Oh
Duke Tobin shut that down pretty quick. I don't think Sam Hubard has to worry. Praised Hubbard for playing through injury, by the way, which I don't think it has been talked about enough. Like, he had a really serious ankle injury that he was expected to miss a lot of time, ended up missing 2 games, came back, and had to have off-season surgery. So we'll see on Hubbard, but I expect him to be back. Like I think a lot of people do, I also think that the Bengals have their eyes right now on the offensive tackles. Duke Tobin talked about how this draft class is really deep at the top. Zach Taylor saying he treats every position the same when I asked about that element of things. But to me, the inclination that a lot of you have had is offensive tackle, defensive tackle. I think cornerback is certainly going to be in the mix there, more on the secondary in just a second, including the safety room. But to me, offensive tackle and defensive tackle, 2 huge spots that the Bengals are clearly eyeing, maybe as soon as 18 and at the top of this draft this week in Indy.
We know that they have been looking for consistency on the offensive line. And I really decided in my head when listening to Duke Tobin that they were going to really hone in on an offensive lineman when he said that position is one of the most important positions when you're building a team. It seemed like to Duke Tobin, that position right there, protecting Joe Burrow, is at the top of their priority list at this moment.
Yeah, and I think it certainly would go a long way if you could add a young player. Not that the guys that they've added haven't helped. I think Orlando Brown Jr. is a big part of their future at left tackle. Mm-hmm. You don't have that at right tackle, and you haven't had that. So
interior offensive lineman as well.
No doubt. If you could get younger or add quality depth, certainly important. Another thing that was big to the Bengals last year is the big plays they had given up. And part of that is the trenches. The other part of that is the back end. Duke Tobin non-committal on the Dax Hill, Jordan Battle safety tandem. Not that both guys won't play, not that both guys won't have a role on the team, but I do think they're wondering, hey, should we move Dax Hill to corner? Well, Mike Hilton is the nickel, and he's the guy that plays the spot that Dax played in college. So could they move him to outside corner? That is a need, certainly a need. I think all systems are open, and they could certainly consider that route this offseason based on what they're discussing here, or based on how they're evaluating it, because clearly they need to figure out something on the back end, whether it's the communication, and it might be that simple.
It could be that simple. Jesse Bates was the biggest communicator in the back end. I would love to hear from Jordan Kovacs on this situation, because as you know, the safety position is one of the toughest spots to play on the field. So it could be a situation where they're giving Dax Hill some grace and just seeing if he can make the necessary changes and progress into year 3. And if they like what they see, they keep him there. If not, maybe those conversations will happen. But I wouldn't be so terribly sure that they would be looking to move him just 2 years in.
Yeah, I agree. First round pick. I think he's got a ton of talent. At the same time, they sure as heck didn't say, hey, yeah, he's our safety.
Yeah,
and so
right. Yeah, it didn't solidify
and so it's like with Hubbard, it was like, oh, he's our guy. And I know he doesn't have the skins on the wall Sam has, but I think that's one of those offseason storylines that will continue into free agency, maybe into the draft, and certainly later this week when Jordan Kovac's scheduled to talk. We will have that right here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk. Anything else stand out that I missed that you want to hit on? I'm putting you on the spot.
The reason why I think I mentioned they might be giving Dax Hill some grace, I think that they have noticed that they took away their veteran, Jesse Bates, or they didn't re-sign him. They didn't allow him to stay here and help.
Von Bell, too.
Yeah, Von Bell as well. 2 key veterans that could have helped their young guys make bigger jumps, quicker jumps than they have. I think they recognize that, and maybe that might be the reason why they would give him more grace in that situation.
She's Elise Jesse. I'm James Rapien. She's laughing at you, or laughing at me. Either way, maybe I'm talking to myself.
Laughing at Andrew.
No doubt. He's easy to laugh at. Out of everybody. If anybody's getting laughed at, it's Andrew Fox Miller. Yeah. And for Andrew Fox Miller and Elise Jesse, I'm James Rapien. We have a ton of videos this week, whether it's Zach Taylor, Duke Tobin. They're already posted as you watch this. Enter the Jungle is on Tuesday night at 8 with Ted Karras, who talks Tee Higgins. Yeah. Plus, we're going to have a bunch of coaches all week long here in Indianapolis. So hit that subscribe button, ring the bell. And for Elise Jesse, I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for watching Cincinnati Bengals Talk.